afternoon, everyone, and I hope you've had a good day. My main message today is for us all to take a moment and reflect on the amazing efforts and work that we've all taken part in, our pupils, parents and staff, over the past several days, and the massive learning that has had to take place. It's a human tendency to think about the things we haven't been able to do, or to just concentrate on the things that we're struggling on, rather than reflecting on how well we've all done, considering the circumstances. We know and understand how difficult it is to operate a school-based timetable from home. But we know that everybody's trying their best, and that's all the teachers and I can ask for. If you're struggling with the pace of the timetable, or if you think that we're providing too many tasks and activities, please let us know, and the teachers will adjust the timetable and activities so that you don't feel you're falling behind. Teachers fully understand how challenging distance learning is. They themselves have their own children to look after while they deliver distance learning school and attend virtual meetings from their homes. But we're all in this together. Your well-deserved Easter break is coming soon, and remember to stay connected to your friends and family, and be creative, unstoppable and positive. Coming up next is story time with one of the animals from the farm, and then you'll find out who's on school radio, a guest that you know. We've also included a collage of school photographs at the end of this video, which is a collection of what we've gathered from the community of 300 families. And if you want to, please send in photographs so that you can share all the activities that you've been getting up to, and send that to community@stedwards.co.uk. And if you want to appear in school radio, just message your teacher. They will get in touch with me. I'll call you, we'll do a little practice, and we'll get it on the radio. Very easy. And as Mr. Bakula, our wonderful IT manager, says, job done. So in the meantime, stay positive and keep acknowledging all the great work that you're doing. I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye.
The story today is A Squash and a Squeeze, again by Julie Donaldson and Axel Scheffler. A little old lady lived all by herself, with a table and chairs and a jug on the shelf. A wise old man heard her grumble and grouse, "There's not enough room in my house." "Wise old man, won't you help me please? My house is a squash and a squeeze." "Take in your hen," said the wise old man. "Take in my hen? What a curious plan." Well, the hen laid an egg on the fireside rug and flapped round the room, knocking over the jug. The little old lady cried, "Oh, what shall I do? It was pokey for one, and it's tiny for two. My nose has a tickle, and there's no room to sneeze. My house is a squash and a squeeze." And she said, "Wise old man, won't you help me please? My house is a squash and a squeeze." "Take in your goat," said the wise old man. "Take in my goat? What a curious plan." Well, the goat chewed the curtains and trod on the egg, then sat down to nibble the table leg. The little old lady cried, "Glory be! It was tiny for two, and it's titchy for three. The hen pecks the goat, and the goat's got fleas. My house is a squash and a squeeze." And she said, "Wise old man, won't you help me, please? My house is a squash and a squeeze." "Take in your pigs," said the wise old man. "Take in my pigs? What a curious plan." So she took in her pigs, who kept chasing the hens and raiding the larder again and again. The little old lady cried, "Stop, I implore! It was teachy for 3 and it's teeny for 4. Even the pigs in the larder agrees, my house is a squash and a squeeze." And she said, "Wise old man, won't you help me, please? My house is a squash and a squeeze." "Take in your cows," said the wise old man. "Take in my cow? What a curious plan." Well, the cow took one look and charged straight at the pig, then jumped onto the table and tapped out a jig. The little old lady cried, "Heavens alive! It was teeny for 4 and it's weeny for 5. I'm tearing my hair out, I'm down on my knees. My house is a squash and a squeeze." And she said, "Wise old man, won't you help me, please? My house is a squash and a squeeze." "Take them all out," said the wise old man, "but then I'll be back where I first began." So she opened the window and out flew the hen. "That's better. At least I can sneeze again." She shooed out the goats and she shoved out the pigs. "Oh, my house is beginning to feel pretty big." She huffed and she puffed and she pushed out the cow. "Just look at my house. It's enormous now." "Thank you, old man, for the work you've done. It was weeny for 5. It's gigantic for 1. There's no need to grumble and there's no need to grouse. There's plenty of room in my house." And now she's full of frolics and fiddle-dee-dees. It isn't a squash and it isn't a squeeze. Yes, she's full of frolics and fiddle-dee-dees. It isn't a squash or a squeeze. Well, I hope you enjoyed that book and all the animals that were featured in there. And again, A Squash and a Squeeze from Julia Donaldson and Axel Scheffler. And I hope now you will enjoy our school radio coming up next. And I'll see you all back tomorrow. Bye.
So on school radio this afternoon, we have Mrs. Pope, who is head of music at St. Edward's Senior and Sixth Form. So let's just see if she's there. Hello, Mrs. Pope.
Hello, Mr. McKernan. How are you?
I'm very well, and thank you for coming on to school radio. And also it's an opportunity to thank you for all the work that you do here at the prep school, and in particularly with the pre-prep department. So all of those children will be delighted to hear your voice. So I was just wondering, do you find, are there any positives at all in terms of music, thinking about over the Easter period? Are there any positives with us having a little bit more time and not being able to go places, if you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, without a doubt, the greatest gift is definitely time. We've never had so much time to practice, time to listen to music, time to compose some music. And this actually might be a bit of a novelty for some of your listeners today, Mr. McKernan. But I say, come on, pupils, talk to your parents. You may not believe it, but they were young once and they listened to music just like we do now. Why don't they interview them? Ask them what their favourite music was when they were younger. Why don't you get them to dig out their CDs? I'm sat here in my extension of my house and I can see hundreds of CDs in front of me and records. Why don't you play some of those records and CDs lying around? You know, you never know. You might like what they liked back in the day as well.
Yeah, so it's that's a great idea, and so obviously they get to know their music, and it's be a great history lesson as well, won't it?
Absolutely.
What about in terms of In terms of pupils learning instruments, what would your advice be?
Well, I know this with my parent hat on. When we're at school, we have no time. Finding 30 minutes to do a little bit of practice in the day is really hard when you've got rehearsals and homework and sport fixtures. It's really, really hard. But, now that's all kind of disappeared, and we've been gifted this time to do so much more than we've ever had before. So if you are learning an instrument or even want to learn a new one, now is definitely the time to get practicing. And I suggest that you open the window so your neighbours can hear you too. Blow the dust off that guitar or that recorder that's been lying around and been neglected. Or maybe your parents might play an instrument. Have you ever thought about that? Get them to teach it to you. I'm a little bit of admittance here. My dad taught me the guitar when I was 7, and we used to sing and play together, and such great memories of that time. Or maybe your brothers and sisters play an instrument. So why not play together and make a family band?
Yeah, it's very interesting because we often say, well, I'll take up that instrument, or I'll do this when I've got time. Or even many adults will say, well, when I retire, I'll take up this instrument or do that. Whereas what you're saying is, they've got lots of time now, and this is a perfect opportunity for it. In terms of, and I'm sure that if the children could send us in into community at stedwards.co.uk, if you could send us in some of those pieces of music that your parents loved, because I think I know all the 80s music, but there might be more. In terms of your mentioning there about playing your own music, and I suppose if we were thinking about how children could compose their own music, how would they do that?
Well, there's so much online that they can do these days, lots of free programs. But I don't know how everybody at the prep school is feeling, but my children have had enough of computers, which I can't believe I'm saying. So I'm thinking, well, what can we do over the Easter period? And I just thought, well, hold on a minute, we've all got this great instrument, which is our voice. So on that note, Mr. McKernan, if you don't mind, I'd like to set up a little challenge for our listeners today.
No, absolutely. We love challenges.
A few weeks ago, Mrs. Dobson, they'll probably recall this, she lost her voice. So I had the opportunity to do a little bit of a warm-up at hymn practice. And I taught them one of my favourites, because as you know, my favourite animal is a what, Mr. McKernan?
You are very fond of pigs, Mrs.
I am indeed. So I taught them the warm-up, whose pigs are these? And then I taught them my new version of it, which had the prep school in mind. So if you don't mind, listeners, I will sing. It might sound terrible. So to remind them, the original goes, whose pigs are these? Whose pigs are these? They are John Potts. You can tell them by their spots, and you find them in the vicarage garden. But the St. Edward's version is this. Whose pigs are these? Whose pigs are these? They are St. Ed's. You can tell them by the heads, and you find them in the prep school paddock. What do you think, Conan?
Well, do you know what? I think if you put a few chords together for me, I think you might be able to put the guitar to that, Mrs.
We could do that. Oh, see, look, we're making music. It's brilliant. So my little challenge, Mr. McKernan, if you don't mind, is that I would love your pupils to make up their own version and video themselves singing it. I would love it if they could include their family or just themselves. They could record it in the garden, in the car, in their house, or maybe walking up a country lane. But it must start with whose pigs are these, and the rest they can make it up. And maybe, Mr. McKernan, could we find a way for them to upload it?
Yes, well, our main way of sending anything in is to community@stedwards.co.uk. But if the files are larger, then we'll have to look at a way that they can send that in. Of whether that's possible to do that through the VLE, whatever, we'll take that and we'll look at that. But that's a wonderful idea. But we will tell pupils and parents and all listeners how to do that tomorrow. Well, Mrs. Cope, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that our pupils will have loved hearing your voice again, and And thank you very much, and stay well.
Thank you very much, and you too, and love to everybody, and look after those animals.
Thank you very much. And that was
Thank
Mr.
you.
Pope, Head of Music at St Edward's Senior and Sixth Form. Thank you very much.